Hey, so this is just going to be another video kind of responding to some Christian arguments as well as some atheist answers to them. This is a video that got a lot of attention, like The Amazing Atheist reacted to it by a guy called The Redeemed Zoomer, and I posted a link to it below. It's basically just some really simplistic arguments used by atheists as well as some even more simplistic arguments used on his part, but some of them are a little bit tricky and a few of them are actually kind of interesting, and I wanted to kind of expand on them a little bit. So here we go. Um, the very first one he uses in this is he kind of will always have like two little people in the argument thing, and one is this really dumb looking bald atheist, and the other is this, I guess, really Chad like looking Christian with a cool beard or whatever. And the atheist asks, okay, religion causes wars, as his argument. And then the Christian responds, only 7% of all wars were due to religion. And actually, that is kind of true. I mean, religion primarily doesn't cause wars, neither does atheism for that matter. But really, where this argument becomes kind of, I agree in some ways, this is a silly argument used by atheists sometimes, but I think a better one would be that, religion has been around for forever and it's never solved very many conflicts. It's never solved very many wars. Um, Atheism, on the other hand, you know, I guess you could say it doesn't necessarily solve either of these problems either, but I think it opens the door for actual resolution rather than letting a pope or some mullahs or people like that come to resolutions of what they think uh, will solve society's problems. We can actually have meetings between national leaders, governments, things that actually look for solutions rather than necessarily looking for solutions from a god or Allah or gods. But anyways, moving on from that, he's kind of right, but he's also kind of, I think, missing the point of that argument. The next one is people do evil in the name of religion. And that's, of course, the atheist argument. The Christian response is most murderous people in history were non religious. And I know who he's referring to here on this. I know he's referring to Hitler, Stalin, Mao. I've heard this a billion times over. Um, yeah, as I've said before, I'm not going to go into it in great depth and detail. Hitler wasn't an atheist. Not that that makes a huge difference, but he wasn't an atheist. He was a Catholic, and he was really more of a cultural Christian. He wasn't super religious, I will grant you that, but he wasn't an atheist. Mao and Stalin were atheists because they were communists. Communism is a secular ideology, but it really doesn't prove much one way or the other. He's kind of right there, but he's also wrong. I mean, ultimately, there have been far more evil religious people than evil secular people, but secular people aren't immune from it. Looking at another example like serial killers, like, Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, John Wayne Gacy, there were some of them that were secular, there were some of them that were religious. So it really doesn't make as big of a huge difference, I think, either way. I think a person who's evil will be evil no matter what, or good will be good no matter what. If you lived elsewhere, you wouldn't be a Christian. That's the atheist argument. And the Christian response is if you lived elsewhere, you wouldn't be an atheist. I mean, kind of true, but also kind of false. I mean, I come from a fundamentalist Christian background. I'm the only atheist in my family, and I'm one of a very small number from the fundamentalist school that I went to growing up. There are other atheists, but not very many, and definitely not in the same mold that I am. Um, Look, I mean, the argument this is used for is since atheism is the lack of an ideology, and FYI, it does actually crop up in more places in the world than any other ideology in terms of just the randomness, and there's no, there doesn't have to be like atheist evangelists or whatever. All there has to be is basically just exposure to actual information, and people begin to become more secular in those societies. Um, but the point on this one is that a lot of people will say, well, I arrived at my Christian, Muslim, whatever views via careful analysis and comparison of different religions, and I arrived at the conclusion that the one that I was raised in, the exact version of Christianity or Islam that I was raised in, happens to be the absolute one true set of answers. It is unquestionably and irrefutably true, and that's no coincidence whatsoever. And it's obvious that it is. It's painfully obvious that it is, and you almost wonder how people can say that with a straight face. Um, Probably one reason why I wasn't very good at being a Christian is I would have probably said, like, I actually tried to compare different religions back when I was a Christian, trying to actually see if mine made more sense than others, which is a thing that not very many people do, which is probably a sign that I was going to become an atheist. But, anyways, yeah, I mean, he is right that the most atheists tend to come from secular families, secular countries, secular backgrounds, but you will find many more people who become atheists from non-atheistic backgrounds than you will religious people from non-religious backgrounds. So, moving on, how do you know which religion is true? And the Christian response is, how do you know which worldview is true? And here he has like a list of course, religions: Buddhism, Christianity, Judaism, and then a list of ideologies: Epicureanism, existentialism, humanism, nihilism. Well, I mean, there's a little bit of a difference between those. I mean, for one, you know, I don't, I'd say to some extent I define myself as all of those ideologies just listed here. I mean, an existentialist, nihilist, humanist. I'm not totally sure about an Epicureanist, but, um, you know, it's a lot harder to define yourself by different religions because religions have things that are meant to be unchangeable, undeniable truths that cannot be easily mixed with other religions. For instance, if Muhammad was Allah's prophet, Jesus was not the Son of God. It is very hard to reconcile those two. Likewise, if Buddhism is true, um, that flies in the face of both of them. So I mean, I understand what he means, but there's things about religion that are much, much harder to reconcile the differences between than there is just between different philosophical and ideological points of view. There may be some similarities in that argument, but it's missing a lot of the point. And before I move on, just one more example of what I mean on that. You will never ever encounter, of all the ideologies he listed there, you're not going to encounter very many people, excuse me, killing each other and flying nationalistic banners under the ideas of Epicureanism versus nihilism versus existentialism. In fact, I don't think that's ever happened. I could be wrong, and I don't think it may ever happen. Um, you will find it under religion, though. You will find people flying the banners of different, political movements backed by different religions and killing each other over those differences because those differences are much harder to reconcile. So that's just one point I wanted to make to help back up what I'm saying. Okay, next point. There is no scientific proof that God exists, as the atheist argument, and the Christian response: science only deals with the physical. That is actually true. Science does deal with the physical. However, that also shows that God cannot be entirely proven using science either, which Christians love to try to say that he can, and he absolutely can't. It can't be entirely disproven, though, but I would say there's some things that call into question the Christian God, like, evolution, the fact that most physicists tend to be very secular, the overall lack of order in the universe. They always like to talk about the order in it, but I look at the lack of order in it, and I think that's a pretty good argument for why there's no God. But ultimately, he's right on that one. Science cannot prove or disprove the existence of a God. There is no evidence of anything supernatural. Looks up demon possessions and NDEs. Okay, and the looking up demonic possessions was the Christian response to the no evidence of supernatural. um, well, I mean, no, demonic possessions can't be physically proven. For one, I'm well aware that there's all sorts of people that have said they've been possessed by demons. Random crackheads and other random religious nuts that'll say, "Oh, look, I died and then I found a devil or a demon came into me and I saw hell or whatever." And then 10 minutes later, they'll also be saying they saw their grandfather's ghost in a barn or something. Um, it's no more provable than most of the stuff with ghosts or most of the stuff with, um, Bigfoot or any of that. I mean, you'll look. I mean, I guarantee you go on the internet, you'll find millions of people that believe there's physical, scientific evidence to prove all those things, but there isn't. I believe demonic possession instances are mostly just mental illness that are being reclassified as demonic possession. I could be wrong on that. You could talk to a psychologist for better information. But I strongly believe that. And to be honest with you, one thing I can't say, though, with confidence, demonic possession, once again, deals in the supernatural element. Therefore, it cannot be proven using natural means. So, again, he's actually kind of going against his own former argument here. But anyways, it's not worth going into any further than that, because no, you cannot prove something supernatural like demonic possession with natural methods. The Bible has contradictions. And the Christian response, you think you found something new? No, but we're actually allowed to point it out with a lot more um, volume. Maybe that's not the right way to put it, with a lot more sincerity and a lot more audacity than people used to be able to point it out with years ago. Yeah, obviously, Christians are aware of contradictions in the Bible, or at least knowledgeable ones are, and atheists are aware of them too. That the church has been killing each over their own interpretations of biblical contradictions, and and their own differing interpretations of how the Bible is supposed to be used, over the centuries. So, yeah, I know that they are aware of some of them too, but they just cover them up and say that, well, our way is the right way, don't question it. I mean, for instance, eternal security, one topic that I remember growing up with within Christianity, because it bothered me a lot, because there's multiple contradictions in the Bible, like Hebrews 6:4, which says that you lose your salvation and that you cannot get it back once you've lost it, which of course implies that you can lose it. There are other verses, I can't remember where, that can imply that you cannot lose your salvation. And this is a big deal. This isn't some small instance, Then I remember the basic schools of thought along this topic, like, they were called Reformed Calvinism, Wesleyan Arminianism, Reformed Arminianism, and something else, Classical Calvinism, something. And bottom line is, I mean, they were all enormous differences, but the Bible contradicted itself all over the place on this topic. And this is a huge one, because if you can lose your salvation in Christianity, that makes a big difference as to the overall viability of the salvation claim. However, Christians can't agree on any of these contradictions with each other, and they never have. It's just atheists look at it and realize the sheer absurdity of trying to prove one absolute way of thinking with a book that has this many differing ways of thinking in it. So it's not anything new, but we're just finally allowed to point out the obvious in a more overt manner. The Gospels were anonymous. Christian response, doesn't mean what you think it means. Honestly, I think we have some idea who the authors of the gospel were. I know it's not like 100% verifiable, but I mean, I think that's a silly argument because, yeah, I mean, we have some idea, so I'm not going to waste my time on it. The gospels misquote Jesus. Nobody can agree on which quotes are true. Okay, that might be true. I mean, actually, this is going to sound like a weird thing coming from an atheist. From what I've known of reading the Bible, there's a lot of historical accuracy in it. I mean, it's not an infallible, divine, holy book, and nobody treats it that way, by the way. Even Christians that say they do, all they do is spend their time cherry-picking the parts they like out and disregarding the parts they don't like. That's why I have no tolerance whatsoever for more liberal Christians who will try to say the Bible is holy, but then they don't interpret even like 1% of it as holy. I have more respect for fundamentalist Christians who actually try to interpret it literally. But where I'm going with this is that I believe the Gospels might misquote Jesus. And of course, he's agreeing with it, so I don't know why he's actually giving into the atheist argument. He says nobody can agree on which quotes are true. Well, that is a sign that, yeah, the Bible probably does misquote Jesus. But actually, I believe Jesus of Nazareth existed, and I do believe that a lot of the quotes in there probably were at least somewhat accurate, because we found a lot of instances from the Bible actually were historically accurate. Not all of them, but some of them. So, I mean, I actually kind of agree. Or actually, I disagree with him in this one in favor of actually the religious people. I think there's, multiple instances in the Bible that are historically accurate, just many that aren't as well. And that includes the quotes of Jesus. Okay, the next one. Okay, there we go. Jesus never claimed to be God is the atheist argument, and the Christian response is show, not tell. actually, once again, I don't. He's kind of right on this. Jesus did make multiple claims that hinted that he believed he was at least somewhat the Son of a God. Again, I'm going off of multiple records that were written either after he was dead or by other people, not him himself. So it's a little hazy, but I do believe he made the claim that he was the Son of God. It seemed to be made a lot more after he was dead than it happened when he was alive. Um, but no, I somewhat agree with him on this. I mean, Jesus did make the claim. There was numerous occasions where he did say, that he came to save mankind, that he was, that God was his father. He may have been speaking metaphorically, but he at least made the claim in at least an indirect way. So yeah. The later a gospel was written, the more divine it makes Jesus. I have never heard that one used, honestly, and I don't even know or care. Moving on. Whenever it uploads. Okay, Christianity has supported slavery. Okay, here's an interesting one. Yes, it has supported slavery. And also the next one is the Bible supports slavery. On both accounts, that is true. Now, modern Christianity, obviously, almost nobody supports slavery, Christian or non-Christian in the modern world. And 99% of people that say that the Bible is the Word of God don't believe that slavery is good. But here's the thing where I just truly lose all respect for some Christians. The Bible is flooded with verses that overtly support slavery, and I've never ever read any in it that overtly condemn it, And that's reading like the NIV, the King James, the New King James. I'm sure within these modern, they come up with so many modern ones that are just complete and total paraphrases that I'm sure they found a few that they found a way to twist into saying slavery is bad, so they can say, see, look, we found out it actually was bad. After 2,000 years, they got it wrong, but we finally got it right here in the year 2023 or 2024. And he has a verse here to support his claim. Moses, because of the hardness of your hearts, permitted you to divorce your wives, but from the beginning it was not so. That's from Jesus, Matthew 19:8. I have no clue how that represents slavery. However, there's dozens that overtly support it. And if you interpret the Bible with any degree of literacy, then you have to admit it supports slavery. It never condemns it at any point. And Christianity, for the people who say, well, Christianity got rid of slavery because it happened predominantly in Christian countries. Well, why did it take them nearly 2,000 years to do so? Okay, they didn't get rid of it during the Middle Ages. They didn't get rid of it throughout most of the Age of Exploration, and it was actually when society was first starting to become secular that we actually started to see slavery disappear. For instance, the first time when France tried to eliminate slavery was during the French Revolution, though Napoleon did reinstitute it. A little bit of discredit to my hero there on that one, but he wasn't perfect. But anyways, no, I mean, Christian societies may have been the first to get rid of slavery, and I don't know that Christianity is uniquely supportive of slavery. Maybe they're right on that, but no, Christianity spent a very long time promoting slavery. In good old US of A here, we had plenty of slavery going on here for a long while, and again, there were Christians that opposed it, but there were plenty of Christians that were in favor of it. So it boggles my mind how Christians will say that Christianity is what led to the abolishment of all these terrible practices when it also condoned them for a very, very long time, But then again, I will say one thing on that. Christianity and religion did not cause slavery. Slavery has existed everywhere, and I imagine if there were secular societies in the past that it would have existed them as well, so yeah, that's the only way I can agree with him on that. And he uses a few examples here, like William Wilberforce and the abolitionist movement during the Second Great Awakening to support his idea, but as I've already kind of answered those, I'm not going to go on them anymore. Okay, God killed tons of people in the Bible. And the Christian response, God numbers everyone's days, he gives lives and takes it. Well, when you can basically just use God to, say, well, no matter anything God does, God is right. I mean, I guess you don't really have to explain anything. Atheist countries are more prosperous. Christian argument, correlation doesn't equal causation. That's true. Yeah, I mean, atheist countries are, in general, more prosperous because of factors that have nothing to do with Christianity or atheism. Of course, then he goes later on to make the case that Protestant Christianity laid the foundations for their prosperity, which completely and totally contradicts the first thing he said. So it shows his own hypocrisy. But look, I mean, for instance, it's economics from as someone who's a finance major in college and accounting and works in business, economics and religion don't directly relate to each other. You can be secular and be very rich and prosperous. You can be religious and be very rich and prosperous. So honestly, he's kind of right here. But if it were reversed, if in general the most prosperous countries on the planet were religious, I guarantee you we atheists would be getting a constant 24/7 earful about how atheism leads to misery, and Christianity leads to a prosperous, healthy life as God's blessings or something like that. So that's the one thing I can say in response to that is I can only imagine what the double standard would be on that if it were reversed. There are 4,000 gods. You're an atheist to 3,999 of them. I just go one further. And the atheist or the Christian response is the question of whether God exists is different than which religion is right about God. No, it's not. It's somewhat is, but mostly no. Okay, and here's what I mean. Okay, let me redefine two terms here before I start this explanation. Theism is, of course, the belief in one specific God. It is the belief with also following a set of religious practices in relation to that belief in a God. But yes, you have to believe in one specific God, usually at the exclusion of others. That is what theism is. Deism, with a D, means the belief in a higher power, but not a specific higher power and no specific set of religious practices to follow it. So by being a Christian, or even if you mixed in another religion, mixed in Christianity and Buddhism, which I've met people who do that. It's stupid, but I mean, you can do anything you want. No, that is absolutely true. You are an atheist to all the other religions. Okay, because you're not saying that, well, I believe there's God, and then I believe that if my version of God wasn't true, I believe there could be a higher power out there. No, you're not saying that. You're saying that you believe your version of God is the only one at the exclusion of others. So yes, that makes you absolutely an atheist in regarding other religions. The only claim that you could make that would actually make this argument valid is if you said, I believe there is no other God. I believe my God is the only God out there. I do believe there could be a higher power out there, but, even if my God wasn't true, I still believe there would be a higher power out there. But that would make you an atheist, not an atheist. I want to make sure I'm keeping this right. I had to rehearse this several times because I actually got that one mixed up when I was doing the first few takes of this, but because it gets a little bit confusing on that word salad there. But yes, if you believe there is any kind of higher power out there, then that makes you a deist. Okay. If you believe that there is one specific higher power out there, that makes you a theist. Okay, so yes, by just selecting one religion, you don't get to claim automatically that you are still in league with all the rest of them and that you still believe there's a higher power, because if so, you would have to reconcile that belief with all the other religions out there. You're selecting one, you're not going into any of the others, you're an atheist regarding all the others. And if you were, then you'd have to explain why you believe it could be another religion out there, and which religion and why, which of course no Christian I've ever met can. Most of them can't even explain their own religion's beliefs, so I don't know. Moving on. I hope I didn't get... It is possible. I hope I didn't make any errors and all that, because it's kind of a word salad going into all of that. It's kind of my own, it's piecing together a lot of different things on that one, and it's possible I may have made an error. Like I said, that's the number one reason I had to redo this video, was that one argument and trying to explain it clearly, but hopefully I did a good job. If God made everything, who or what created God? God is the uncaused causer. I'm not a physicist, so I'm not going to go into whether or not I believe that God is something that could or could not have a causal factor behind him. I don't. I think you do have to give evidence for how God was caused, but I could be wrong, and I honestly can't give an extremely good explanation for why. So, my only argument would be which God, which God or gods. There's so many different possibilities that still just saying there has to be a God creating something doesn't mean it has to be your God, or it doesn't mean it has to be a God at all. It just means, once again, you're just leaning on the fact that the God of the gaps argument, and that there is still some things we don't know about the origin of the universe. Science disproves God as the Christian argument, science disproves God as the atheist argument, and then the Christian response is that um, science cannot prove or disprove a God. That actually is true. If God is good, why can't he destroy evil? He eventually will, is the Christian response. Well, he best hurry up because he's went for thousands of years and he hasn't done a particularly good job of it thus far. He seems to be pretty partial to evil thus far from what I can observe over the millennium. So, you're putting definitely a lot of faith in your God there because, like I said, he hasn't come through for you in a long time and doesn't ever seem that he's going to. So, whatever. If God is good, why do bad things happen? We deserve it. And that's the Christian argument. That's his only argument. We deserve it. Okay. I guess I understand what the argument actually means here. He means we're all sinners and we deserve to be punished. But do you ever actually examine how your answers sound to anybody other than yourself? It's amazing hearing some of these answers that I was once comfortable with as a Christian on the other side. It's just surreal. It's kind of like, how did I ever believe that was an actual answer to the question? That's a horribly sadistic and horrible way of thinking. Yeah, we deserve it. Cancer, floods, plagues, wars, starvation. We deserve all of it. Okay, next. Animals don't sin. Why do they suffer? And Christian response, all things will be restored. They will be compensated. So what does that mean? And it's a Bible verse, by the way. He's quoting from Ephesians 1:10. So does that mean all the animals that are sent to the slaughterhouse are going to be up in piggy heaven or something? Does that mean all the cats and dogs that are abused by their owners are going to be up in doggy and kitty heaven? I'd like to hear some more information on that one, but I don't believe animals go to a heaven or hell, and I don't know. It's not something worth going into anymore. How do you know that God isn't evil? And Christian response, evil isn't a substance. I think what they just mean is looking at the track record of how bad our universe is, how do you know that God is actually not the bad guy? And some Satanists would say maybe Lucifer is the good guy. The kind of like this new show I started watching called, I'm forgetting. It's called something Hotel. It's on Amazon Prime. Amazing Atheist reacted to it. Hakeem Hotel. That's not it. It's something like that. If I saw it, I'd remember. But it's a dumb cartoon where like everybody in hell is like the good guys, and the heaven people are the bad, and people up in heaven are the bad guys, and it's really stupid. It actually kind of grabs me as like what teen girls that grew up watching that Monster High or whatever it's called now probably watch this as an adult. It's basically like a kid show with a lot of F-bombs in it. But, it's kind of a funny premise, but a dumb show. But yeah, I mean, they just mostly are saying that God, looking at how evil the world is, that God created, supposedly, how do you know he's not evil? So, moving on. Okay, there we go. God can make a rock he can't lift is the atheist argument. The Christian response is, you mean God can contradict himself? I don't know. I have no real answer or knowledge on that one. Maybe God can make a rock he can't lift. Maybe he can't. I don't believe him in either way. So, I mean, it doesn't make a difference to me. So, moving on to the next one. Why did God let all evil exist at all? Because he's glorified in defeating it. Well, technically that does answer the question once again, but I mean, if you're a Christian or Muslim and you're happy with this, I encourage you to just step back and think about that answer for a moment, thinking about the history of the world and how God defeats evil, looking at the history of the world. If you really honestly believe that, well, I can't change your mind, I suppose, but I can just tell you, as someone who once used that argument myself, now being on the other side of the spectrum, I see how ridiculous it is. Next argument, religion is just wishful thinking. If that were true, the Bible wouldn't be about how much we suck. I mean, okay, well, here's one quick note on that. I mean, the Bible does mention how awful and evil and sinful people are, but most Christians aren't aware of that. Most Christians, what is it they call the Bible? A love letter? God's love letter to humanity. Sorry. It's just knowing all the stuff I know about what's in the Bible, I just can't help but gag a little bit when I hear that. Yeah, Christians make religion into whatever the heck they want it to be. If they want, I've never met a Christian that believes, according to their own religion, that they are going to hell. Or the same is true for other religions, by the way. People always believe that they're getting the good end of the deal with their religion. And I think that qualifies as wishful thinking. And again, if you don't believe me, go talk to some Christians and Muslims and see how many of them actually take their views in the Quran and the Bible or whatever seriously. And to the extent that they'll actually villainize themselves or believe they're going to hell or whatever by their own religion's belief, you won't encounter hardly any of them. They make it into whatever the hell they want it to be, And I've heard that from many priests who will tell you that as well. And because it's just true. They can say whatever they want to people, and people will still believe whatever the hell they want to believe. So, Christian or atheist, that kind of applies, honestly. Psychology explains why you believe in God. And the Christian response, if God is real, why wouldn't there be psychological benefit to believing in him? I don't think psychology does explain why people believe in God. So, then again, I'm not a psychologist, so I can't really speculate. Okay, the next argument. Spiritual experience can be explained by brain chemicals. So can romantic experiences. That doesn't mean your wife isn't real. Kind of. I mean, but, for instance, when a person says that it was God that, they claim it was a supernatural occurrence when God came and they saw God, or they died and briefly went to heaven or whatever and came back, like that stupid movie, Heaven is for Real, which I'm very embarrassed to say that a lot of people in my family take very seriously. Yeah, no, that does somewhat invalidate it. It means that maybe that person didn't die and go to heaven. It means maybe it was just a chemical reaction. Also, the same can be true about romantic experiences, FYI. Sometimes you may think you love somebody, but then they say that the romantic love actually has the same effect on your brain that a small bit of cocaine does. So actually, sometimes when you think you may be in love with someone, it may just be a rush that's going through you at the moment that'll fade out soon. And I think, as somebody who's hasn't been in that realm very much, but I've talked to other people, that's a pretty good comparison. Whenever it loads, I can ask the next one. Sorry. Okay, drug trips show that spiritual experiences are from the brain. The response, people who have had NDEs and drug trips say they're different. I really don't know what to say to that one, so moving on. The story of Jesus was copied from Horace. The Christian response is, even atheist scholars know this is silly, and then he talks about how this is a Reddit atheist argument, and he has a picture of an ugly bearded atheist screaming. Okay, no, sorry for my delay. I was just thinking on this one a little bit. Actually, I don't know anything about the story of Horace. However, I do know one thing that probably not a lot of atheists are super familiar with, and not a lot of Christians in general. I don't know how many of you have ever heard of Zoroastrianism, but it was an ancient religion in Persia and predominant in the Persian Empire, and is still a small minority of Zoroastrianists exist today in Iran. But essentially, it is a monotheistic religion that has beliefs in heaven and hell, good and evil, and very similar to Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. And ironically, it was very prevalent in the time right before those religions started to ascend on the global stage, which was in the Persian Empire, which of course preceded the Greek and Roman empires. So, that does not mean that they are 110% derived from Zoroastrianism. I could be wrong. However, I've always found it very interesting that Zoroastrianism was there and had a lot of similarities and was in the parts of the Persian Empire that Christianity, Islam, and Judaism sprouted up in later. So, yeah, I think there's a little bit of a case to make that some other religions influence Christianity. Again, I have no knowledge whatsoever about Horus, but I do know about some other religions and their correlations to Christianity. So, no, and FYI, on that note, Christianity, Islam, and Judaism have a shocking amount in common with each other. So, it's clear that you can see elements, and their holy books are largely the same. So you can see elements of the two that they've all kind of borrowed from each other. Anyways, next argument, faith is the opposite of logic and reason. Faith just means trust is the Christian response. Well, a lot of Christians take pride in having blind faith, okay? Like, for instance, you can, for instance, you can tell a Christian that, you can explain to them why they didn't see God when they died and then came back to life. You can explain to them how, that isn't God speaking to them. That's just the little voice in their head. But a lot of them will say, I have faith. I don't need logic. I don't need evidence. And they take pride in that statement. And again, I've been around a lot of Christians. I would know this. So that's what we kind of mean by faith just being blind trust, because a lot of Christians will almost overtly admit that it's blind trust and show no shame about it. So yeah, I mean, faith is not always the opposite of logic and reason, but the way a lot of religious people do it, it is. So, and waiting for the next one to load. Sorry. Okay, evolution proves God didn't make the world. And the Christian response, God works through natural processes. Well, I guess he believes in evolution, but a lot of other Christians don't, like the ones that raised me did not believe in it. Yeah, evolution proves that the Genesis account of creation is not true. Evolution proves that there is possibility that there was not an intelligent designer, and evolution is not mentioned in the Bible. So to some extent, it doesn't entirely disprove a God, but it does call into question a lot of the biblical accounts of a God and his creation. So yeah, evolution has at least some. There's a reason why evolution torques off so many religious people. Christianity was spread by military conquest, and the Christian response, it was illegal for its first 300 years. Yeah, it was illegal in the Roman Empire, but then it became the official religion of the Roman Empire after Emperor Constantine made it that way. And then it started getting spread through the Roman Empire, and once the Roman Empire collapsed, all the subsequent kingdoms that came after it, and then they spread it to other parts of the world that they conquered. And FYI, though, Christianity and Islam are not unique in that sense. That's the way most religions have been spread. That's the way atheism has actually even kind of been spread. I mean, we're not as bad about it as they are, but communist countries, that's really what propped up our numbers in the 20th century. I mean, if you look at it, Russia and China are big countries. And when they became communist and started forcing secular thinking onto people, that's really what kind of propped up the atheist numbers a lot, unfortunately. I wish I could say it's not true with atheism, but it is. And it's very much true with Christianity and Islam, but to be fair, it does apply always to all ways of thinking. So, okay, next one. Constantine invented modern Christianity. A Christian response is that's a Reddit myth. I actually agree with him on that. I don't think Constantine invented modern Christianity. He contributed to it, but yeah, I don't know. I've never heard that one. Why so many Christian denominations? And the response, they agree on the essentials. No, they do not. No. In fact, as I have made the case for in a few other videos that I made, that I don't think even a lot of Christians or atheists understand where I'm going with it, there's actually more uniformity in the atheist mindset, really, than there is amongst the Christian mindset. Of course, there are atheists that have differences in their viewpoints, but, I mean, amongst Christians, you would swear sometimes you can't even imagine that they're in the same religion. And if you don't believe me, think about it for a minute. Think about, things like war and politics. Think about Christians' different views on those things. I mean, there are liberal and conservative Christians. There are Christians who believe war is a great thing to spread God's word, or they believe war is just a necessary thing, which in some ways I kind of agree with. But then there are others who believe all killing is wrong and believe all war is wrong, and they will use the Bible to reference it. And then there are those who will use the Bible to reference the opposite. And, Christians who will condemn each other to hell by their different ways of thinking if you're not baptized the right way. Or like I just mentioned earlier, the beliefs on eternal security. Some Christians believe if you sin too much, you're going to eventually lose your salvation. Others believe that if you renounce God, you lose your salvation. Others believe that whether you like it or not, once you become a Christian, you're a Christian for life and you're stuck going to heaven with God, whether you like it or not, which makes me wonder if heaven really is a heaven once you get up there. But, anywho, no, there's a lot of differences between them. There's more differences, and I would wager there are more differences between the average Christian than there are between the average atheist. Atheists tend to follow a more overall left-leaning worldview. I mean, and that's even me. I'm not what I would consider a hardcore liberal. But, most atheists I met tend to be a little bit more liberal. Even the really, really conservative ones that think of themselves as conservatives tend to have a little bit of a liberal spin on it. By nature, going against the religion that you were brought up with, it's really hard to be a social conservative and have that view. So, anyways, I know Christians do agree on some things, atheists disagree on some things, but I would say that this argument is a complete load of nonsense because I do not believe that Christians agree on the essentials, and this guy needs to spend more time around Christians that have different views than him. No evidence for Jesus outside the Bible. Read Josephus. Well, I actually agree on this one because I do believe Jesus of Nazareth existed, so no argument there. You think God made billions of galaxies with billions of stars in each of them, and the Christian response. Oh, and then also, and that is just have a personal relationship with you, and the Christian response is yes. Well, I mean, I suppose, though, it seems like if he did make the universe just solely for humans, he could have done a lot more to make it accommodating towards us. I mean, couldn't he have made like a handful of more planets other than just Earth suited to human life? And couldn't he have made life a little easier on this planet? I look at it and I find it a little bit hard to believe that this was tailored, designed for us by a god. But I mean, everybody has their own viewpoint on that. So I mean, I guess perhaps you see it different if you're a Christian on that, but I don't think it's really tailored to human life, this universe. But there's the end of the list. As you can see, this isn't exactly like a great intellectual set of answers and questions on the part of this this Christian called the Redeemed Zoomer. But it got a lot of attention, and I thought it was an interesting list. And anyways, thanks for watching, and see you next time. Bye.